Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Just a quick note that this meeting is being transcribed and recorded. Therefore, if you do not agree with that, unfortunately, I will have to ask you to remove yourself from this meeting. This is done in order to help us collate and organize and write up all of the questions and answers that arise out of this event. So once again, the meeting is being recorded and transcribed. May I please ask if people can see my screen? I am currently sharing a screen. I got a couple of thumbs up. Thank you very much for that. Great. I'm going to give it 1 more minute, and then I will start with the admin order of the event. And we shall kick off with the event in that case. I'm allowing more time as we had quite a few people invited to the event and registered, so I just want to give everyone time to make themselves another cup of tea or coffee or finish their previous meetings. Okay, let's start, shall we? Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edith Barbanton. I work for the Ministry of Defense Strategic Command, and I work specifically in the innovation team. One of the projects that we work on is Project Tampa, as it is known in the MOD, or Additive Manufacturing as a Service Challenge. Today's event will be focused around additive manufacturing as a service, Spiral 3 in particular, but also Allied Additive Manufacturing Interoperability Project, aka AAMI, from the US DoD side and America Makes. If I suddenly stop, it's because I am admitting people into the meeting, so I guess slightly distracted. Bear with me. Thank you. In terms of the admin order of the event, so once again, I will remind you that this meeting is being recorded and transcribed. This is to help the home team, both home US and both home UK, with the creation of the questions and answers documentation following this event and with the dissemination of it. Please keep your cameras off. This is because this event is being hosted on the MOD services, and they do not have the best ability to host big events, especially when I'm also running it off my house Wi-Fi. So that's the only reason why you're not seeing our faces today. Then please keep your mics muted unless you have been selected for a question. This is just so that we provide everyone with enough time to have their questions raised and answered. So please use the raise hand option in the bar if you would like to verbally ask your question. Feel free to use the Q&A section in Teams. Feel free to use the chat function in Teams, but also the Slido question and answer thingamabob, which allows you to post a question anonymously if you wish to do so. That was put in the event advert. I will also put the link in and the code in the chat once I finish rattling through this, so that you have all the options available to you to ask questions. Questions can be written, yeah, as I said, in the chat, Q&A tab, in Slido, and please raise your hand. I will be doing the DJing between selecting the questions, so please bear with me if we are having lots of hands raised, but also questions in the chat bar. I will pivot between the two throughout the day. Because I can't remember the next slide, I'm just going to quickly look. Yeah, that's the agenda. That's it for the admin order. I will quickly go to you, Neil, as I see you've got your hand up, and I don't know if this is anything to do with the admin bit of the event. I've allowed your microphone to be turned on. Okay.
No, sorry, mistake on my part. Apologies, everyone.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Cool. In that case, I will hand over to John McMahon, the project manager from Project Tampa, as he will be presenting the agenda and the rest of the bits of the event. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this industry engagement. This is the second one of these we have done. The first one we have done bilaterally, UK to US. So we're really looking forward to discussing with you all what we aim to achieve in Project Tampa and going forward. And Neil, you had us all excited with maybe our first question of the day. So we're all a little bit flat now, but no worries about the apologies. Glad to have you on board along with everybody else. So as Edit says, John McMahon, I am the project manager for Project Tampa. This has been running for a while now, and we'll go through into what Project Tampa is and where it fits in. Alongside me, I have Edit. I also have Bernie Saunders, and they are that's my project management team. I also have a couple of contractors working for me in Alex Champion and Richard Amber, and our team leader, Charlotte Robinson, sits on top of us but has a good overview. So we have plenty of people with either significant or growing experience in this initiative as we go forward. So as you can see on the screen, the agenda, we'll go through this in three main parts. We'll talk about the project and what we are expecting. We'll talk specifically about some Spiral 3 information. And you won't be hearing just from me. We have Evan Hallander from the US who's going to choreograph US snippets into this as well. And then finally, we will talk about the project timelines and then open the floor to all of you good ladies and gentlemen for questions, challenges, and whatever else that you have related to Project Tampa Spiral 3. So next slide, please, Edit. And on to the next one. So Project Tampa Spiral 3 has been running for a while. Spiral 3B is specifically, we are looking in UK-US collaboration. We have identified that across both sides of the Atlantic, we share a number of challenges in adopting additive manufacturing into our supply chains and into defence. And across those, we have picked out some key parts that we are seeking to address through Project Tampa. I'm not going to read this slide out to you verbatim. As you can see, equivalence in interoperability and the ability to be able to produce parts both sides of the Atlantic to an equivalent standard to grow that global supply chain. The focus for this spiral only is laser powder bed fusion of critical parts. We'll go into why of that in a bit more when we talk about material specifications. And this is not just a technology program. We understand a lot of the technologies. We understand there are technological challenges, but there are also barriers to the development of the use and the qualification of AM, and we want to understand those through this process so that we can take those lessons away and overcome them to make this a key part of our future supply chains. There is a significant alignment between the UK's advanced manufacturing strategy, which is in the final throes of, shall we say, titivation before it is launched towards the end of this month, and the US's regional sustainment framework, hence why we are doing this collaboration. Next slide, please, Edit. And I'll apologise, it's this clunky. I would have had slide control, but I've been abandoned at the side of the road after my hire car turned up late. So Project Tampa, initially created by Chief Defence Logistics and Support in 2021 to accelerate the adoption of advanced and additive manufacturing technologies into the defence industry. The focus at the time and the mandate around this was very much metal parts. We are keen to use this to address the supply chain challenges we face, particularly around obsolescence and long lead items. And the priority areas to deliver this are shown there, and each of those areas has a working group, and we'll cover that when we talk about governance in a bit. But Project Tampa is only one part of the utility of additive across defence. And if you look to the diagram on the right-hand side of the screen, bottom right, we talk about design for new platforms. And for us, the Submarine Delivery Agency are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else in this. With the new class of submarines, that is a UK, Australian, US conglomeration that is using AM parts. Project Tampa, we've had some successes, and a couple of the parts that we've created at Project Tampa are shown at the top of the screen, towing eye and a sonar array housing, and those parts were produced in Spiral 1. Spiral 2 parts are coming out of the factory now, and when we update this brief in months to come, we will be showing some new and even more interesting and intricate parts. And then finally, when we look at the bottom right of that triangle, you've got some parts produced by 71 Inspection and Repair Squadron from the RAF as temporary repair components. And at the very bottom, the tented and ISO container facility is an Army project called Project Brocker, which is AM in the battlefield for expedient repair. Next slide, please, Edit. So how have we done Spiral, Project Tampa and the Spiral approach? Again, I'm not going to read this verbatim. You can read the problem statement and the vision. But the key is, what are we trying to do is increase the confidence and expertise in using AM across defence and the defence industrial base. Spiral 1 on task in March 23 completes this month. The final parts and reports are in, and all we have left to do is make the payments to the last companies on that. That produced metallic parts, additively manufactured, for use in current defence platforms. We had 11 parts from 5 different companies. Spiral 2, which is currently ongoing right now and will complete at the end of this month, with reports due imminently, although we are tracking a couple of companies that will slip over into next year. Again, 11 parts this time, 4 companies involved, moving the challenge forward and producing for us either safety critical parts, parts from the air domain, or parts that are in use today in combat in platforms that we have gifted to Ukraine. And that is where we are at the moment. Spiral 3, and again, we'll talk more in detail, is in competition. We are now looking less at the technology and the printing of parts per se, but using the printing of parts as a medium in which to test quality control and data transmission. Initially, we're going to do that from the UK in Spiral 3A between UK companies to prove that we can produce the same part in an equivalent manner. And then the latter half of Spiral 3 is what we're all here today to talk about predominantly, is that interoperability across the UK and US supply chains, with US suppliers and US vendors working alongside UK suppliers and vendors to create equivalent parts across both sides of the Atlantic. And then finally, Spiral 4, still up for some redesign and reshaping based on the lessons we take out of Spirals 2 and 3, combined with the lessons we've already identified from Spiral 1. But the idea is from the end of Spiral 4, we will transfer into business as usual, and whatever we have learned will make AM part of the future UK and potentially global supply chain across defence. Strapline at the bottom, as you can see, whilst Project Tampa is UK national activity, Spiral 3B or AAMI depending which side of the Atlantic you're on, is focused on testing international interoperability. And that is the key takeaway for Spiral 3B that we're going to talk about today. Next slide, please, Edit. So I mentioned earlier the governance. The governance is really important here, not because it's governance, but because of how it is formed and led at every level of the governance, from the executive group through to the various working groups. We have what we have fondly rebranded a thruple, but that is one MOD and one industry co-chair at every layer of the governance, so that we are doing this in a collaborative and collegiate manner. And that's vital because we're going to grow this as a technology, increase resilience in the supply chain. Defence and industry, neither of us are in a place to be able to do this on our own. We need to do this together going forward. And if you certification, we know from speaking to people like ASTM, there are 130 odd standards in use right now, with another 50 odd in development. Inventory management, yes, always going to be a challenge. How do we build this into the supply chain? Digital thread. Looking at print standards. Apologies, I'd say I am at the side of the road. I will speak slower. Let me drop out and come back in and see if that helps. I'll speak to you in a second.
I should have prepared some lift music for that. Whilst
Okay,
John is coming back, I'll give. Oh, there he is. John?
Is this any better for everyone? Edit, you came through loud and clear to me.
For now, yes.
Okay, please do flag up if it breaks up, and if I have to drop out and drop back in, I will do. Thanks, Stu. Thanks. Okay, so that's the governance. As I say, when we're closing out, Digital Thread Working Group is looking at digital standards and digital transmission, and most critically for all of us, digital security. Next slide, please, Edit. So Spiral 3, we've talked about 3A and 3B loosely. This breaks it down for you. It's a little bit more detail. So Spiral 3A is a UK only initiative where we are using UK primes to, or consortia leads is another phrase. It doesn't have to be primes, but they do need a defence contract to use a number of suppliers to prove that parts can be produced to an equivalent manner. The reason this is UK only is the US have their own equivalents for 3A ongoing already. And then Spiral 3B or AAMI, this is the key piece for today's discussion, is how do we bring the UK and the US suppliers and vendors together to enable us to do that contracting to be able to prove that equivalence across the Atlantic. Key thing here is this is innovation. And if at the first attempt it doesn't work, that is not the be all and end all for us, as long as we've identified what didn't work, so we can go around and address this again, hence why we've continued to push these challenges forward. So how are we going to do this? So Spiral 3B is going to be done in 2 phases. I'm going to hand over to people who are experts in this to talk about operational qualification shortly. But through operational qualification and equivalency framework, in phase 1, we will produce some test bars to prove that we can produce the material to the same standard across that Atlantic bridge. And then we will move on to phase 2. We'll have a short gate review to ensure that we've not missed anything. and things and things are going according to plan before we then move into phase 2, which is then looking at the production of parts, which will be built against the part specification list that we will come to. This will then validate a UK-US supply chain and goes a long way in helping us understand how to go on and validate a global supply chain. Next slide, please, Edit. I have seen a couple of questions come up in the sidebar. I can't read them because they disappear too quickly, but we will come to all of those questions at the end. So we talked about the minimum part feature list. The criticality around the design of this list was to ensure that whatever parts we produced were parts that had the opportunity to add value for defence going forward. So if you read through the list, is it on the critical spares list or is it obsolete or obsolescent? So it needs to be a long lead time item that fits within those categories. Equally, if it's got a long lead time but a platform is going out of service, it is no value to us. So we are keen to ensure that the selection of the part is for a platform that has longevity, that is struggling with operational availability because of missing parts or difficult to get hold of parts. For the last 2 points, it's a description from your from the engagement you've had with the delivery teams. Is it critical or non-safety critical, and which domain does it operate in? The more challenging the part, the more interested we are, I think, is the best way we can describe what we are looking for here. Additional for Spiral 3B, we have agreed with our colleagues in the US and in the DoD Mantech team, so Brett and his team, we will focus on laser powder bed fusion and the 3 metal types listed, the Ti64, nickel alloys 718 and 316. The reason for doing this is twofold. Firstly, there's going to be enough variables in the processes and the procedures as we go through this test. So we wanted to reduce the number of variables in the process to make it simpler to get a baseline against which to test. And secondly, there are a number of standards that already exist for the materials against which we can measure and make an assessment. Next slide, please, Edit. So I'm going to hand over to Evan now to choreograph the US. So we're going to talk about the US aspects of AAMI.
Morning, everybody. Quickly give an introduction. My name is Evan Handler. I am with the U.S. Navy out of Naval Surface Warfare Center Carter Division, just outside of Washington, D.C., in West Bethesda, Maryland. I am the Deputy Government Program Manager for America Makes. For those on the UK side or those just unfamiliar, America Makes is the DoD's Manufacturing Innovation Institute for Additive Manufacturing, serving as a public-private partnership to bring together government stakeholders, industry, and academia to accelerate the adoption of additive manufacturing. So AAMI on our end is tying into the Project Tampa Spiral 3B to really assist with this demonstration of interoperability for qualification on both sides of the Atlantic. To very quickly give some extra context of that, the phase 1 aspect will focus on operational qualification. So this is the testing that on a specific machine that you can produce material that meets your material specification that is already been generated by your initial material qual. So the IMQ box up at the top. This, to answer the question on why 316, 718, and Ti64, these are materials where we, the US DoD, already have sufficient material testing data to have those material specifications be able to be set and to be tested against. So this phase 1 effort will be producing and testing the coupons to show that your operational qualification will meet that IMQ and that we can qualify your machine to make that material. Phase 2 from there will move into performance qualification. So this would be the part specific testing and first article testing needed to say that your part is qualified and that you are making it sufficient that it can be used in service and will meet all of its requirements. And the part of this that we are very interested in is that will be done on both the US and UK side to show that those parts are effectively interchangeable regardless of regardless of which side of the Atlantic they are made. So there are a number of other parts of qualification that are in here that are a little bit out of scope of this effort, particularly the initial qualification, or what people will call machine qualification, would be expected to have already been done by those participating in the program. And then obviously production is out of scope, but we hope that the parts that are qualified can move into production once we are done. Hand it back over to you, John.
Thanks, Evan. Next slide, please, Edit. So in terms of what we are seeking from a collaboration perspective, I've mentioned it right at the outset. We are looking for collaboration, not only between defence and defence industry, but now expanding that to be defence industry on both sides of the Atlantic. So from a UK bidders perspective, expressions of interest will have been registered and invitations will have been sent out to join Spiral 3. The bids are open now for Spiral 3 completely, which includes 3A and 3B, and they close towards the end of the month. We'll go more on timelines later. Spiral 3A, as we talked about, multiple UK suppliers to create equivalent parts from common data. And then we do the same across the Atlantic with multiple suppliers, UK and US for 3B. In terms of collaboration, we understand the challenges around IP and protection of data, but everything that we want from this needs to be shareable, particularly because if we can't share, we can't identify and then learn lessons going forward. We would do this not only in terms of the written reports that will come at the end of the exercise, but we run collaborative working groups. At the moment, we do 3 a year in the UK, but as we move into Spiral 3B, we will look at collaborative working groups both in the UK and the US. Currently, all of our vendors and some of the suppliers attend the UK working groups to learn from cross-briefing and lessons sharing. We would require consortia leads to do that with trips to both the UK and the US covered in their bids, and we would strongly encourage them to support attendance from their suppliers. This is a Q&A session. We appreciate. We have Slido open. It will remain open for 2 weeks following this call for questions, but specific procurement questions for the UK need to be accessed through the Defence Sourcing Portal. And when we share these slides, that link takes you directly to the Spiral 3 tender. US questions related to AAMI should be sent to Cole Miller at the project call email address there in American Makes. And any questions concerning the RFP, again, through Cole Miller, but FAQs will be posted along with the responses on the American Makes AAMI website. Again, the link is there, which will be shared with you after this. This gives us a period during the tendering process to allow us to maintain shared awareness and treat everybody equitably, so we don't face any unnecessary or undue challenges at the end of the process, which result in us delaying going forward. Edit, next slide, please. So Spiral 3, this is the key information. We'll go forward onto the next slide, please. And we'll talk about what we are looking to do specifically. So what do we want to do? We've talked about it, UK companies, a prime, an OEM, or a consortia lead, using different UK companies to produce parts to an equivalent standard. All the things we're looking at are in blocks around the outside. And that is everything from the digital transfer of data to the physical transfer of the part, understanding the challenges around the commoditization of IP, ensuring that people are appropriately rewarded for that, even though they are not actually producing the part. And how do we track that? How do we qualify the material, the processes, the parts in a way that makes it repeatable and not having to go through the qualification every time we do this, which speeds up the process and creates everything we want to do in terms of enhancing resilience within the supply chain. So if we go to the next slide, please, Edit. So when we've done that in the UK, we then want to go and take this into Spiral 3B and repeat it with the extra biggest piece that is key for us is understanding the implications for export, whether that be licensing, whether that be ITAR, whether that be IPR, and what that means. There is going to be discussions around technical, financial, and commercial equivalency. We all appreciate, we all speak English, but everything is lost in translation. And I have experience of working across many English-speaking nations who don't speak the same language. So we just want to understand where those things will trip us up so that we don't make those mistakes going forward. And in the bottom, reinforcing, establish AM equivalency and interoperability between the DoD and the MOD so that we can do this going forward in a combat or in a conflict situation. Next slide, please, Edit. So in terms of the funding, for Spiral 3A, the UK has 950k split amongst a maximum of 5 bidders. If we get less than 5 bidders, we will split that equally amongst the bidders up to a maximum of 250k per bid. So if we get 4 bidders, that will be 240 something k each. Don't have to do maths on the hoof. It's 242.5k. But if we only get 3 bidders or 2 bidders, that will be 250k per bidder. We did have £1 million for each spiral, and we've taken some of that money out to cover the cost of MTC and also some ASTM work to put the F42 guide that we've produced around AM into the right side of ASTM, so it's openly accessible without companies, SMEs, vendors, suppliers needing to pay for access to it. Costs are the same for Spiral 3, same conditions around being split. And we are, as we have done in Spiral 1 and 2, we are anticipating equitable private venture contributions from the bidders as we take this forward. In addition to that, the MOD staff costs and travel are all covered out of a separate pot, all go towards this. And again, there's a fairly significant contribution in next slide, please. Okay, Evan, back to you.
Yep. So on the US side, we have about $1.1 million set aside for this effort. We expect this to be split among 2 awards. America Makes will be the contracting agent that will be receiving the bids, facilitating the review of proposals, and inevitably contracting that funding out. We are interested in seeing cost share from proposals, and that will be highly considered for selection. On the timeline, the project call is obviously already out, and we are here today with the industry day. I won't read everything on here, but the deadline for lead proposals to email intent is on the 4th of April, and then submittals are due on the 5th of May, no later than 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we hope to have the notification to those who will be awarded by May 26th. So back to you, John.
Thanks, Evan. Next slide, please, Edit. So in terms of the timelines, Evan's alluded to the US timelines there. From a UK perspective, the commercial tender went live on the Defence Sourcing Portal on the 3rd of March, with invites sent out to everybody who's registered on the R&D framework. That closes the 31st of March. The FAQ closure, so Slido closes slightly different dates, 24th of March for the UK and 26th for the US. As soon as that tender period closes, we in the UK will score it, and our formal moderation is on the 8th of April. Notification to successful bidders will be shortly after that, with anticipation on current plan that the UK contract award will be issued on the 1st of May. Spiral 3 activity will then commence. That Spiral 3 activity is going to split into two parts. We'll have 3A and 3B. And the finite detail of that will be developed based on the project plans that we see from the bidders that are part of the tender paperwork that we are expecting. In terms of working groups, currently the next two UK working groups for Project Tampa are the 4th of June, which is going to be held in the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham, and that is being held alongside the AM event TCT 360. And then in October, and I don't think we've set the exact date yet, but I'm sure Edit can correct me at the end, it's going to be held in the MTC in Coventry on current planning. So they are the key deadlines we have at the moment from a UK perspective. Just to reiterate what Evan's just said over the US, the proposals are due the 5th of May and decisions shortly after that by the end of May. There is no concern contractually around the delay between the US spirals being issued and the UK spirals being issued, because we will be doing our 3A work initially before we join the UK-US collaboration and doing that. So that explains why there is a slight delay, and it is not of concern. Next slide, please, Edit, which I think it takes us up to questions. It certainly does. So I know we've got a few in the chat. Edit, would you like to choreograph and tell me who I'm answering first and what the question is, please?
Yes, so we've got quite a few questions in the chat, in the Q&A box, and on Slido, so I will pivot between them. I will read out some of these questions and then allow you, John, to respond. First question that I'll take is from Michael. Will the recording be available to attendees after the event? I can answer this one. I will be able to upload the recording onto Kahoots. That is the site where we upload our documentation on the UK side. If you would like access to it, please drop me a line in the chat and I will request that you are provided with access to this. As for on the US side, this recording will be made available to the US team, and then I will let them figure out where this is being shared. If anyone from the US side would like to add anything to this.
Yes, on the US side, there will be a link on the America Makes website. This is Ben DeMarco from America Makes, so we'll have the recording posted.
Great,
Over.
thank you, Ben. Second question from Nigel. Will a list of attendees be circulated after the call? Unfortunately, I'm not able to share a list of names. All I can share is a list of the name of the organization that people work for. This is due to data protection, the Data Protection Act and measurements. The next question is from Konstantin. Is this solicitation responsive to enabling technologies that cover only part of the phase 1, phase 2 scope?
So, Konstantin, when you say enabling technologies, can you express in a bit more detail what technologies you are thinking about?
Konstantin, just really quick, could I please ask you to raise your hand? I've got 6 pages of attendees and I won't be able to pick you very quickly. Thank you very much. I have now allowed your microphone so you can add to your question.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Yes, can do.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, Konstantin.
Thank you for picking this up. Let's say everything around cybersecurity and the digital component, so unrelated to the manufacturing side and qualification side itself. Thank you.
So that is a discussion to have with either a prime or an OEM who's leading a consortia. We have put a specific couple of comments in our tendering documentation for the UK primes, certainly, or the consortia lead. We have a cyber essentials plus qualification that they would be required to have, but we have also asked them to talk about or we've ensure that they delegate and manage the cyber risk across their supply chain. So that is potentially a service you could offer, but it wouldn't be directly to Tampa. It would be through one of the companies. Is the only way I could see that being added. Certainly, it is something we are actively looking at and considering. I don't think I can give you much more on that. Brett, Evan, do you have anything more from the US you think you can add to that?
No, I think you covered it.
Thanks, Evan. Next one then, please, Edit.
Thank you, Konstantin. If I may ask you to unraise your hand, please. Thank you. Next question is from Julian. John, does there need to be a UK prime and a US prime providing a joint bid, or can 3B bid just include one half of the picture? For example, one UK prime with a UK and a US provider?
So yeah, Julian, well worth clarifying. From the UK competition, we would expect a UK prime or OEM with a UK and US supply chain. And through the American Makes project call, that's where we would see the US prime, almost as two independent bids, but proving equivalence that US data can be produced by the UK and UK data can be produced by the US. Hopefully that helps clarify. If not, let me know and I can add more detail. But it's two discrete tenders for each side of the Atlantic.
Thank you. Next question is from Steve. How do we know what is on the critical outstanding spares list, or how to gain access to it?
So the critical outstanding spares list is owned by the support contract owners, whether that be the OEMs or the primes that are doing the support list. If you are a supplier, and in the UK, there is some work being done by Team Defence Information to try and, should we call it, speed date the OEMs and the suppliers, and that is how where the data sits to understand what is on those outstanding spares lists. Hence the reason why in our UK bid, we've asked for the consortia lead to have an extant support contract with the MOD for capabilities. If I was to go and try and dig you out a critical outstanding spares list, I would give you what I've received from one vendor, which is reams and reams of spreadsheets that you can just about filter through the filter bars and doesn't add a great deal of information because a lot of it sits on proprietary systems.
Thank you. Next question is from Julian. Are we able to pick a higher performance steel than 316L?
So I will go over to Brett in a second. My personal view is that defeats the object for Spiral 3B because we have the data sets for 316, which is what we want to test against. Anything further on that, Brett?
Yeah, John, so that is correct. We need to have to use the performance-based operational qualification that we are doing as part of this project, as related in the NCAMP documents. We need to have existing initial material qualification sets and preferably data sets that are going to be able to be shared publicly. And so those are the three data sets that we have that could be shared amongst all of us. So that is why we were focusing on those particular alloys. Over.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you. That leads me to a question that was listed on Slido. Is the NCAM document number NDAM 001 and 002 available to the public? If so, where can they be accessed?
So if you are a UK bidder or vendor, those documents were attached to the bid documentation on the Defence Sourcing Portal. Evan, I'll go back, Evan or Ben, sorry, I'll go back to either of you. Are these available on the America Makes website as part of the project call?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So right now, the way the RFP is written, they're by request. So you can email the project call to request the documents, and I'll work with Cole to see if we can get them uploaded to the website. But for now, email the project call email to request the 2 supplemental documents.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. And this is a question for Evan. Could you please define the term equitable, 10% or more?
So for cost share, there is in the language in the call for proposals does not require cost share, but we are interested in having cost share. I think the number that, in a best case around 25%, but again, it is not required, and we will judge them based off of the merit we get for the public dollars.
Thank you, Evan. Similar to this, there is a request in Slido to again go through this entire slide if possible, especially the funding element.
Sure. So on the US side, we have $1.1 million. We expect to split that among 2 awards. On the funding, it will be contracted through America Makes. So awardees will need to be America Makes members, and you will need to be an America Makes member prior to submitting your submittal. There are deadlines listed here for when you need to have that put into place prior to the submittal. The equitable contribution, the cost share, like I said, is not required per the call for proposals, but we are going to consider it. So we'll leave it at that. If there are any more questions, please reach out and we can clarify as needed.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Evan.
and
There
I'd
is
like to
one
add
more.
one additional note on the eligibility. So the lead proposer is required to be an America Makes member, but I would send the team again to the RFP. There is specific language around the project team and eligibility requirements. Again, as Evan said, the lead proposer is required to be an America Makes member, but please read the eligibility requirements in the RFP. Thank you.
Thank you both. This is similar to the answer is similar to the question that was asked by Salem. So I hope this has cleared your question. If not, please post it once again in the chat and I will get to it. Thank you. Next question is from Gil. If your company has not been involved in spirals 1, 2, and 3A, can we apply to be part of spiral 3B?
So if you, I'm guessing from the phraseology, it's a UK company. Absolutely, you can be involved in spiral 3, all of 3, because that tender is live now. If you contact us afterwards, we will ensure that if you're not already on the R&D framework, we will get you lodged with an expression of interest so you have access to it. although through that link you should be able to see the information and everything you need to do will on there when the slide comes out. And then depending where you sit in the ecosystem as a supplier or a vendor will depend on where it's best positioned for you to join Spiral 3A and 3B. As I say, it's the whole of Spiral 3 is on tender now. And just because you haven't done previous ones doesn't exclude you in any way from doing future ones.
Thank you. Can we bid just for 3A?
So there is some slight confusion in the tendering documentation at the moment. So we are working up a formal response to that question. We've been asked that separately, so that will be issued in due course.
Thank you. Is 3B later than 3A?
So 3A and 3B is a joint bid. We have asked bidders to put a timeline together. Our expectation, and certainly from the solicitation we did in the UK at the end of last year, is that there would be a staggered start simply because of the amount of resource that vendors and suppliers have. Similarly, and I know there's a question in the chat around the go no go decision. 3B is dependent upon a UK US government to government project arrangement being put in place. That is being worked right now, and we have a 60 to 90 day window in which we expect that to be completed and signed. If there is for any reason something that occurs that means that government to government arrangement isn't signed, that will undermine our ability to complete Spiral 3B, hence why it is an option. In terms of risk rating, it is a very low probability that will occur, but the impact, as you can guess, is fairly significant, hence the 3B being an option for the authority. That will answer that question as well, I believe, Edit.
Yeah, thank you. In line with this one, there's another anonymous question of why is the US getting longer to bid than the UK for 3B? Or is it the case that the UK don't need to bid for 3B? It is not clear.
So we covered this and maybe not clearly enough in the discussion. The UK has a combined bid for 3A and 3B. We've been quite sporty on our timelines because we want 3A started and in train to free up resource to align to when the US are doing their 3B activity. So we then synchronize the 3B elements. The US already have some activity underway, which is equivalent to our 3A. So they're only bidding on the latter half of the contract, whereas we're bidding for it in two stages. And there's lots of confusion around spiral stages and phases, which is why I'm careful about the language. So Spiral 3A, Spiral 3B is essentially 2 stages of Spiral 3. Hopefully that makes it clearer. If not, we will develop a written response and try and make it less off the cuff in terms of an answer. We understand the logic, but let's come back to us in Slido, and if not, we'll put a written response out on that one.
Thank you. I will now switch back to the questions in the chat. This is from Crosby. Does the part need to be in service with the UK and the US, or is a part for a platform in service with just the US fine for this project?
So it depends on whether you're bidding into the American Makes framework or through the UK tender in the Defence Sourcing Portal. And the minimum parts list for the UK is UK parts. And I'll ask Evan to clarify, but my understanding is for the US, it would be a US part. They don't have to be in service simultaneously with both nations. Evan, are you content that that's the correct answer from your perspective too?
Yes. And I'll double check and we'll get a final response. But my understanding is it would need to be a US part. If it were something that were in service in both nations, that would definitely be a win. But my understanding is it's not required in the RFP.
Thanks, Evan. And as Evan said, it would be a win. So if people are considering F-35 or C17 parts, or airframe parts from a common air platform, which is what we have most common across the UK and US, then yeah, absolutely go for it. We would really relish the opportunity to do something in a global supply chain that provides parts in service to both, but it is not a requirement. Next one, please, Edit.
This one is from Yash. Will there be any interest in WAM in the future?
So absolutely, we did WAM in Spiral 1. So the sonar array picture I brought up when we talked about Spiral 1 was a WAM part. And for Spiral 3A, we have not restricted the processors or the metals from a UK to UK supplier to vendor perspective. So if you are a WAM supplier and want to jump into bed with a UK vendor who wants to do a WAM part, please absolutely go for it. We are open to all processes. As I talked about earlier, we've only narrowed the process and the materials down for 3B because there are so many other variables we are introducing. We want to be able to test what we want to test and not just the technology.
Great, thank you.
Next one, Edit. Thank you.
This is from Ortiz. Any interest in laser powder DD for large parts for repairs, near net shape manufacturing, and new coatings?
So exactly the same as the previous one. We are open to explore everything. We did do a repair in Spiral 2, and we will talk about that when we do the Spiral 2 closeout of the session in June. It didn't go as expected, but we think we know why. We're waiting for the vendor to come back with the final report on that after we asked them to do a little bit of a tabletop examination. And a lot of it was down to not necessarily the nature of the repair, but it was the costs of the repair associated with the cost of reproducing the part that caused us to look twice. But absolutely open to anything that will add something to the golf bag of spares capability that gives us more resilience in the supply chain going forward.
Next question is from Julian. Are multiple bids from the same prime acceptable?
I would have to say yes, but they would have to be unique bids, because if it's the same bid from the same vendor and they all score the same, that is unfair. If they are the strongest bid and we have one prime producing the same thing 15 times. I think that's the best answer we can give you right now, but let's come back with greater clarification on that. There's nothing in the documentation that I understand that would prevent you from putting multiple bids in.
Thank you. Moving on to some more questions from the Q&A. Let me just quickly scroll to them. How will the UK prime for Spiral 3B be selected? Is there a separate procurement opportunity being initiated in the UK?
No, so Spiral 3B and 3A are being tendered together right now. And as we talked about earlier, that 3B is then an option that the authority will choose to take. But we anticipate combined bids for 3A and 3B. Or if companies wish to, through that tendering process, only bid for 3A or 3B, certainly that is an option that they can exercise. As I say, we will get more clarification on the ambiguity that's currently in the documentation on that. We've reviewed that ourselves, having had that question recently, and we are in the process of issuing a formal response.
Thank you. When do you expect the Spiral 3A work to be completed and the 3B work to begin?
So that is very much down to the project plans that the vendors would deliver. We are not going to tell you how to do this. The only deadline we have is the work needs to be complete in the next financial year, because from a UK perspective, our money is only available up until the 31st of March 2026. From a US perspective, slightly nuanced on Evan. I'm going to let you answer what the US constraints are from timelines on this.
I'm actually going to pass this one to Brett or Elisa.
Could you repeat the question again, John? And edit.
Yeah, so the question asked in the Q&A was, when do you expect that the Spiral 3A work to be completed and 3B work to begin?
Yeah, I think so.
So
Do you want to answer
just to
Brett, or
be
you want me to answer
clear, just to be clear, Spiral 3A is not a US activity, right? Spiral 3B and AAMI is a US activity. So for us to answer that question, as to when 3B work will begin, now I'll defer to Ben and the schedule. I should say AAMI or 3B from the US side. Ben?
Yeah, so thanks, Brett. That's part of the clarification I wanted to make sure was clear. AAMI and Spiral 3B, US, UK are two separate projects. So America Makes will be leading the selection for AAMI. The plan notification to the project teams is May 26th. So after that is when the project team and America Makes would move forward into contracting, and work would then start after the contracting phase is completed.
Thank you. Edit onto the next one then, please.
Thank you. This is from Marcus. Is there a desired component size range that has been selected, or will this be a factor for selecting the appropriate manufacturers if the component is selected?
So the component selection we have left, or we have requested that the bidders engage with the delivery teams to identify the part. Of course, the more complex, the more challenging the part is, the more interested we would be in seeing that taken forward, particularly against the parts list specification we've identified, as that drives the value for defence going forward.
Thank you. Next one is, if parts manufactured in the US and UK are qualified based on the US and UK databases of the materials respectively, how is the interoperability ensured?
I guess this is Brett. I'll take that one. So we're using the same database. We're gonna those three material systems. It's going to be, there's one TIE 64 data set, there's one 316L data set, and there's one of the third material, that data set. I think nickel alloy 718. There's one data set that we're sharing. So it's not like there's a US data set, a UK data set. It's all one that we're going to use as our reference data set.
Thanks, Brett. And that's exactly how I understood it.
Thank you. Next one is from Gregory. I'm from an aero OEM. We have a part that is DFAM, not producible via casting. Is it intended for the Abrams tank? It is intended for the Abrams tank. It is not officially an obsolete part. Would this be considered?
So I'm going to hand that to you, Brett or Evan, because if it's Abrams, I'm guessing that's going to be a US bidder, and that part selection will be down to you.
All right. So how I would interpret this is, as long as there is some form of a demand signal for that part, then I think it would be fine. It may not, you don't necessarily have to be obsolete. It can be a part that's sustainment related. It could be a critical part that's required, but as long as there's a demonstration of a demand signal for it, that's fine. Please make sure in your proposal that you would include the information to justify it and explain why this is an important part for that platform.
Thank you.
Actually, Brett, that's a perfect answer because that's similar to one I issued for a UK vendor who was asking a not too dissimilar question. It's all about the value proposition. Next one, please, Edit.
This is from Steve. Can the part manufacturer be a DoD, MOD approved or authorized contract manufacturer instead of a prime?
So if you meet the criteria in the ITT, i.e. you have an extant support contract with the MOD and you're a UK vendor, then yes, there are some criteria listed in the ITT around those criteria. If you meet those criteria, yes, absolutely, you can lead a consortia and put a bid forward with your own suppliers to deliver those parts.
Thank you. Now moving back to the chat questions. Just quickly going to scroll to them.
This is Brett. I want to make sure I say one other thing about that. And Ben, I'm going to need your help to make sure that what I'm about to say aligns with the RFP from the American side. But one thing to be aware of, if you bid for this and you're not a prime, you do have to make sure that part, and you want to take that lead role as a prime, but you are instead a contract manufacturer. You do need to make sure that you have all the IP for that part, that you have, that you are able to share it and control the sharing with the US and UK provider underneath you, or however you set up your supply chain. But make sure that, if you are with the United States and you are a contract manufacturer, you need to make sure you've got a UK supplier as well as part of your team. But you also need to make sure that you can handle all of those roles that a prime would normally do with sharing the information, ensuring the intellectual property for that part, etc., when dealing with the part. So just be aware. I think Ben checked me and make sure I'm okay, but I think a contract manufacturer can take the role of the prime in our RFP, but you just have to be aware of what you're signing up for.
Yeah, Brett, you hit the nail on the head. There's language in the eligibility requirements specifically around the team and the lead proposer, as well as having, as Brett said, rights and access to the data of whatever part that you propose. So it has to be a real part with a real application, and this is outlined that you have to have some sort of authority with that. So I would just encourage those on the American side to read the AAMI RFP and check the language around eligibility, because that aligns with what Brett says. That is correct.
And I would absolutely echo that for UK bidders, because those criteria around access to the IP, etc., are also covered in the UK ITT.
I can point you specifically on the US side. This is covered on page 18 and 19 of the RFP. So please make sure you read that. As Brett said, it is a decision criteria. Over.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Ben. Edit, next one, please.
Next question is for the US team. Will America Makes members only be able to apply to Spiral 3B with a US prime, or will they also be able to work in the Spiral 3B scenario with a UK prime?
Yeah, I think this is important. I'm going to speak up here. So Spiral 3B and AAMI are two separate project calls. I think I said this before. I want to make sure that is clear. So that's the first part of this question. The second, to answer that, project teams are allowed to submit more than one proposal. This is in our requirements at the beginning, and this is outlined in the eligibility. So just again, encourage those that are submitting to read the eligibility requirements. But this would allow for that to answer that question.
And let me reiterate what Ben was saying there. So the Spiral 3B and AAMI are two separate solicitations. But we are trying to build a community together, leveraging the Project Tampa ecosystem to work together and incorporate U.S. teams. We do want to have, when it comes to the operational qualification data that's being generated, materials data, we do want to create a common pool of data. We want to have these discussions that could lead towards, and we hope to have it lead towards, the development of standards and so forth. And definitely form the MOD and the DoD of being able to have a common industrial base for AM. So, but these are two separate solicitations. So if you're a U.S. prime, you're going to want to be looking at the America Makes solicitation. And of course, UK primes, you're going to be looking at the Project Tampa Spiral 3B solicitation. So just want to foot stomp that, make sure it's clear for everybody.
Thanks, Brett.
A bit of a change of topic. Is it possible to use the same part from previous spirals for Tampa Spiral 3, both A and B, assuming it aligns to the criteria set out by the authority?
Assuming it meets the criteria set out by the authority, then there's no reason why not. We've had a similar question about a part that is expected to be codified. And my answer is, if it is not codified at the time you bid, then it meets the criteria. Once it is codified as an AM part that is then demandable, and it's no longer critical or obsolete or in short supply, it would struggle to meet the criteria. So it just needs some thought into how it meets that criteria, but no reason why you can't redo parts. I think it reflects back on a comment I made at the working groups last week. We appreciate that if we take a new part, the amount of time it would take to do the designs and the reverse engineering can eat into the time for us to prove the operational qualification. So we aren't after parts that are going to take us 9 months to reverse engineer and develop some new CAD drawings for, given we will only have 11 months period of performance on this project.
Thank you. The next one is from Colin. For data qualification, sharing prints between the UK and US, is there a need to directly collect data from the LP laser powder bed fusion printers? Securely deliver the data to the machine and securely collect and transmit the machine telemetry data back to the source.
So
Yeah.
So what? Go on, Evan. You're going to chip in while I think about this one.
Yes, it would be required to, as required by law, policy, what have you, for securing the data of our parts. It would need to be secured or transferred securely to the AM as a service provider and obviously the machine, and then as required to meet any conformance requirements or monitoring requirements, or as it is of value to demonstrate, yes, the data coming off of the machine should be transmitted appropriately and securely if required back to the prime for review.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, within the US solicitation, there's no requirement for that. I think, and Evan, let me just see if I'm saying this right. I think it would only depend if the prime required that as part of their part qualification. Does that sound about right, Evan?
Yeah, and for things like depending on what type of machine, many will generate an automated report from the build that is the various things went well, and here are the timestamps and a couple of other odds and ends. That as a minimum conformance is normally gathered, and again, if required by the prime, should be transmitted securely. this will depend on what's required by the prime for the part.
In many cases, we understand that printers will not be connected to networks. There may be an air gap. So we understand that having direct a network with the printer may not be possible, and that is okay. But if the prime requires something from the machine data for their part qualification, obviously, yeah, you would want to be able to securely deliver that data. You know, it just you don't necessarily have to plug the machine up to the network.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Thanks, Evan. I think the thing that was throwing me was when you said telemetry. I think the key thing is, as Brett alluded to, it's the data required to support the outcomes that we've described in the either the RFP or the ITT. And if the data doesn't support that or isn't required to support that, it's not necessary. If it is, it needs to be done in a secure manner that meets the basic principles of cybersecurity, of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Thanks, Edit. Next one, please.
Thank you. I will quickly jump to some Slido questions. So this is for the US. Under the 550K contract efforts for the next phase, for US companies under America Makes, is there a partner limit to the number of teaming partners?
No, there's no limit.
Thank you. Next question is, can two legal entities, run from the UK and run from the US, both from the same parent company, be funded under the project call?
So if we're talking, for example, BAE Systems, UK BAE Systems, US, in the same that we can have single vendors putting multiple bids in, I cannot see any reason why not, as long as the bids are unique and meet the appropriate project call or SOR for the nation into which they are bidding. Anything further to add on that, Evan?
No, yeah, I was going to say the same. To my knowledge, there's not any reason why that would be forbidden. As long as, again, they are two separate proposals.
Great, thank you. Is there any possibility for an extension to the UK bid? There isn't enough time to put in a bid together, especially with the lateness of these engagement sessions.
I would put that formally in writing into the DSP and we can consider it. As we mentioned at the start, engagement for this did start in October last year, with the first formal industry day in November. So put a question in through the DSP formally with reasons why, and we will consider that.
Thank you. For interoperability, is there a requirement for NIAP certification or STIG approval for connections to AM machines?
So I mean, I feel like this goes back to our earlier question. There's no requirement under this activity to actually put time machines in the networks. And if you are putting machines on networks, make sure you're doing it securely. So.
Okay. What kind of assurance of secure data transmission is expected? Are cyber attacks expected to be mimicked?
No, we would not expect the mimicking of cyber attacks. We would expect essentially a cyber security risk plan to have been considered and implemented from the UK in lines with the guidance that the National Cyber Security Centre publishes for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus.
That leads nicely into the next question, which is, on the UK side, Cyber Essentials Plus is required. Does that have to be in place at the bid stage or prior to contracting?
CE Plus will be required prior to contracting if you're going to lead a consortia, and then the site if you read the ITT, the cyber risk management then sits with the consortia lead, whether that be a prime OEM or another bidder, to manage their supply chain.
Thank you. We've got a follow-up question about the legal entities. So can two legal entities run from the UK and run from the US, both from the same parent company, be funded under the project call on the same bid?
Is the question here if both entities are proposing to either the US or UK side to work together? That's what it sounds like, but I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like it's maybe, if we use BAE again, just so I know they have, it comes off the tip of the tongue. If they have BAE Systems UK as the lead, but one as the vendor, but one of their suppliers is BAE Systems US to produce the part along with a UK supplier. Again, if it's that structure, I can't see any legal reason why not, but we would have to look at the structure of the bid to see if it's compliant as part of the tendering process. As long as there is a prime, a lead, and then suppliers for the parts, and it meets the structure as we're showing here in the spirals and phases slide of a UK or US prime and then multinational providers, I can't see why we couldn't accept that.
Thank you. And the last question I've got from Slido is more of a statement rather than a question, but if John, you could please provide some more information. Is Tampa Sparrow 3A and B also talked about equitable private venture funding? Could you please tell us a bit more about the expectation, John, on this private venture funding?
So very similar, but without specific percentages on what I think it was Evan mentioned earlier from a US perspective. We would anticipate private venture funding coming from the bidders. Again, what that private venture funding is in terms of amount aligned to what the UK government is putting in, the closer they are to matching, or if it's greater than what the government's putting in, the stronger that bid will be on that element of the bid. I can't be any more specific than that. We don't have a minimum or maximum. It will just add strength to the bid.
And I'm just going to reiterate on the US side, equitable funding, cost share, call it what you will, is not required. It is a nice to have and just adds to the bid.
Thank you. Back to the question.
Yeah, one other point I want to add to the cost share is, yes, it is not required, but it is being evaluated. So on the RFP for the America Makes projects, it's part of the evaluation criteria, can be found on page 30 of the RFP. So again, as Evan said, it's not required, but it is a part of the evaluation criteria. So it's on page 30 of the RFP.
Thank you. Next question is, currently Sparrow 3B is an option in the ITT. When will a decision be made if the authority will enact this? Will this be pre or post bid submission?
This will be post bid submission. And as I alluded to earlier, it is based upon having in place the UK-US government-to-government project arrangement. That is being worked quite vigorously right now, and on discussions we had with the US last week. 60-day stretch target, 90-day reasonable target, with a high degree of confidence of that being in place. Once that is in place, we will then enact the option. So it's that 60 to 90-day window period is when we would be doing that, assuming there are no hiccups that we haven't foreseen at this stage. Hence why it is an option, because it is a risk mitigation measure.
Thank you. The next question is from Thomas. In the America Makes RFP, the total, I don't know this acronym, TPOP is 9 months, but mentions 2 phases with 9 months allocated for phase 1 and then a toll gate before proceeding to phase 2. If we are successful in phase 1, is there follow-on funding for phase 2? Does the proposal need to cover a phase 1 and 2 plan, even if the initial work is only for phase 1? So this question is from Thomas Spears. If you'd like to go back to it and see it, as there are quite a few follow-up questions within this.
I can take this one, Evan, if you'd like.
Please.
To answer this question, responses are required to outline an approach, which is conducted in 2 phases. This is further defined in the RFP. You can find this starting on page 8.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think there was another part of the question about the funding. The funding intended is for both phases.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next question, I just want to highlight a message sent by Stu Alden. So an email went out this morning to all UK SMEs that have registered for notifications on the Team Defence Information website to request submissions for the Primes and SMEs the speed dating event on the 19th of March, which is next week. Stu has posted a website link in his chat, so please do check it out. If you haven't received the email, please email him. His email is listed in there, and he will forward you the notification. Responses are needed to be in by close of play tomorrow evening. Until I scroll to the next question.
Please. Thank you.
The next question is, how about wire laser DED instead of WAM?
I think we covered that one earlier. Say for Spiral 3A, we are open to all technologies. That is for the consortia to come together and work out what part they want to produce and what the most appropriate method is to do that and put that in their bid. We are not limiting creativity for Spiral 3A because we don't have the same challenges of internationality, so we can accept some more variables around processes and materials that we have agreed we will remove from 3B because we have other variables coming in instead.
Next question is from Gary. Can a prime also effectively ask as an AM provider, or does it require 2 separate bids from third-party suppliers, one in the USA, one in the UK?
I presume, Gary, you mean effectively act as an AM provider. Entirely up to the whoever the lead for that bid is to determine who their supply chain is. So if a prime has AM facilities and wants to take the place of an SME in that consortia, then there is no reason why not.
Thank you. The following question has 3 different sections. It is a request for clarification. Can you please confirm the correct submission process? First one is the submission process for the USA and UK submission does need to be independent. The second one is USA submission and UK separate submissions, but as a team. And the third one is a USA submission with a UK team member.
So Evan or Ben, I'll hand this over to you because this is around your RFP is the way I interpret the question.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer this one. Yeah, so there's important dates highlighted. If you can go to the important dates slide, edit. So the first question is US and UK submission. That is correct. They are independent. So the US bidders that are looking to submit should email an intent to the project call at americamakes.us by April 4th. And those submissions for the US are due on May 5th. In your submission, you are required to outline and describe your team and that structure. So that would be on the lead proposer of the submission. The second question, I think I answered both questions with that. And then the third question, yes, the USA submission, in your team structure, you should outline the UK team member or intended team member that is on the UK side. So again, this would be under the eligibility requirements that I mentioned in the RFP, starting on page 8, where this is further defined. But hopefully that was able to answer those 3 questions.
And again, just to be clear, Ben, a USA team must have a UK team member, right?
Yeah, that is correct, Brett. Again, without going into further detail, we give some background on why this event is taking place, as Brett mentioned. So the USA team must have at least one UK team member that will be producing material in this project. Over.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Brett. John, I see you momentarily unmuted yourself there. I shall continue with the next question in that case. Is there any scope for a US university, who is also an America Makes member, to lead or partner with a US or UK industry on this call?
So again, as there's been a few questions about how large the team can be, there's no restriction on the size of the team. There are eligibility requirements on the lead submitter. So I would just encourage those in the US to make sure to read the RFP and make sure you take a full look at the eligibility requirements for who is required to be the lead submitter for this project call. Over.
Thank you, Ben. And the final question that I see in this chat is from Paul. Does the focus on critical parts relate to criticality in the context of supply chain and/or in the context of airworthiness? If it is airworthiness, does performance equivalence include fatigue testing and/or damage tolerance?
The simplest answer to that is yes. The more correct answer is when we look at the minimum part specification, we are seeking for critical spares. So we talked about already obsolescence, long lead time items, parts that are causing us operational capability loss because they're not available. When we did Spiral 2, we focused very much on a parts for use in for Spiral 3. We have asked you to describe which domain the part operates in and whether or not it is safety critical. the domain you operate in is less is going to less affect the scoring, but the safety criticality and the difficulty of producing the part will certainly have a bearing on the scoring when we look at how that plays out in the value proposition. As I said earlier, the key thing for us is understanding what the value proposition is of the part that is coming in for defence from both a spares availability and a learning about this process. So it's all down to that value proposition. If it's airworthiness, then you have to produce a part of an equivalent part. So the appropriate testing would be necessary. Brett, anything to add to that?
Yeah.
I was going to add. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
Go.
All right.
No, you go ahead, Ben. I saw you come off mute. I'll come after you.
Yeah, so for the U.S. teams specifically in the RFP on page 9, there's 2 documents that are provided. One is guidance for operational qualification, and the second is additive manufacturing low cycle fatigue testing with as-put-in surfaces. So those two documents can be provided.